Living a life in full is a conversation you always wanted to have with that person who gave an amazing TED Talk, or the author of one of your favorite books, or that inspirational Olympian you always wanted to know more about. It's graduate-level conversations with those making a difference in the world and in the lives of others. This show brings you new ideas and approaches so that you can live a life in full. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Stout, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to another episode of Living a Life in Full. I'm Dr. Chris Stout, your host. Today's episode is brought to you by ATI Physical Therapy. Try physical therapy first. Did you know that 70% of patients that utilize physical therapy first for spine, shoulder, or knee pain are successfully treated without the use of any kind of imaging, prescription drugs, or even a physician visit? Experience the ATI difference. Your return to an active lifestyle is their primary concern. They'll work with you to help reduce pain and achieve your goals in a fun, friendly, and encouraging environment. They have convenient locations close to home. They can schedule your first appointment within 24 to 48 hours. They offer early morning and late evening hours to fit your schedule. They have beautiful, vibrant, modern clinics. They have personalized communication with you and your doctor. They offer diversified, goal-oriented specialty services. Their staff have state-of-the-art clinical training, equipment, and technology available to them, and they have a department of research and data analytics that examines and help improve outcomes. They offer hands-on therapy, exercise, strength training, and cardiovascular conditioning to help you improve your physical strength, reduce pain, and avoid recurrence of future injury. They'll help you address chronic pain or help you recover from an injury or surgery expertly, quickly, and conveniently. For more information, please go visit atipt.com. Welcome to another episode of Living a Life in Full. I'm Dr. Chris Stout, your host. I'm really excited to have Colin O'Brady on the show today. Colin is an amazing guy in a variety of different kinds of ways, and we'll get into that in the show. The key thing, I guess, is that he has set a world's record in terms of being the fastest person to climb the 7 summits, which is the tallest mountain on each of the 7 continents. And then also, as if that weren't enough, to throw in what's referred to as the Explorer's Grand Slam. In addition to those, he went to the North Pole and the South Pole. He is an amazing athlete. He was a professional triathlete, and he's got some background that is pretty traumatic in terms of an accident that he was in, but how he's come back from it and the spirit that he has with it and the humanitarian aspects of what he's doing with his life these days is an amazing testament to the human spirit, the kind of person that Colin is, and I just found it a very inspiring time to spend time with him. So I hope you enjoy the show and give a listen. Here's Colin O'Brady. Welcome to another episode of Living a Life in Full. I'm Dr. Chris Stout, your host, and I'm particularly excited today to have Colin O'Brady. He has an amazing resume that continues to grow. Historically, he was a soccer guy. Then he became an Oregon State swimming champion. Went on to Yale, go Bulldogs, and was a NCAA Division I varsity team swimmer, diver. And then has gone on to have an amazing resume in the worlds of triathlon and climbing and setting some world records. So I don't want to have any spoilers or anything in the intro, but he's got some amazing stories to tell, and we want to dig in deep and figure out kind of how he's done some of these things and learn more about his amazing career and what he's doing in the humanitarian space as well. So welcome to the show, Colin. It's great to have you.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So, hey, gosh, in doing background research on you, I think other than maybe Cat Fancy magazine, I think you have been profiled in every other print magazine known to man. So you have, is it over 50 triathlons that you've completed?
Yeah, so I raced professionally in triathlon from 2009 to 2015, so about 6-7 years on the professional circuit. And I think last count, I've raced in 25 countries, 6 different continents, and of course all around the U.S. as well. In international professional competition all over the place. So yeah, it's been quite a journey racing all over the world, to say the least.
That's great. We had Sarah Fix on in an earlier episode, and we were talking about Kona and whatnot. So it's probably a little bit of a different kind of a thing being a professional triathlete. What kinds of distances, and tell us a little bit more about that as a pro.
Yeah, so I actually mostly raced the Olympic distance circuit as a professional in the U.S. national team. So I raced the ITU, which is known as ITU circuit, all over the world. So triathlon is actually an Olympic sport. First, not everyone knows that. So there's specific rules that kind of govern that. But I've also raced all of the distances, so half Ironman, full Ironmans, all that kind of stuff. But my primary focus was the Olympic distance circuit.
Gotcha. Do you think that your swimming was that fundamental in terms of what got you into it, or were you also? I mean, soccer is going to have a lot of running and whatnot with it, but.
Oh yeah, it was, for me, definitely having a swimming background was pretty significant, and being helpful for sure. But yeah, I kind of fell into triathlon in a somewhat of a roundabout way. I don't know if we're gonna get into it later, but it was kind of through some tragedy after college, and didn't ever really think of racing in triathlon, but kind of found it in a new way, and it opened up a whole bunch of doors. But before that, I had never biked or run professionally or really with anything other than on the soccer field. So I'd never been a track athlete or a cyclist or anything like that. So learning 2 new disciplines was unique and a fun challenge.
Yeah, that's good. I think, I have a bias. There's no empirical science behind this, but it seems like, I know that you're like on Rich Roll's show, and he obviously was I think a Stanford swimmer and has become an amazing triathlete too. And it seems like, swimming oftentimes is the weak spot for a lot of triathletes. But I think if you come into it, with a swimming background, especially, NCAA Division I varsity, things like that, it really maybe tees a person up to be able to, look to expand into the other areas of the cycling and the running. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that swimming is interesting. It's just one of those sports that obviously builds incredible endurance, both emotionally and physically. Just the endurance, aerobic side of it, but also staring down at a black line every single day for 4+ hours a day since you're a little kid. So something to your brain that forces you to be able to push through some hard things, I suppose. Definitely benefited from that. But also, yeah, I mean, swimming is one of those pretty technique-based sports, and so I find that it's not that you can't learn it as an adult, but it's becomes harder and harder than when you're thrown in a pool when you're 5, 6 years old. You kind of have that, what swimmers call feel for the water. Whereas with cycling and running, obviously both have their own technical aspects to it, but they're a little bit, the skill acquisition I think is a little bit easier than swimming. As you alluded to, you see some incredibly fit and strong athletes who haven't spent much time in the water, jump in the water in a triathlon, and they're having a hard time there for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, challenge and open water swimming, just understandably so. If you haven't spent a lot of time in, lakes or oceans or, open water of that kind, can be pretty intimidating to be, way far out there.
Gosh.
So all of those things play into the start of a triathlon, without a doubt.
Yeah, I think the that whole fear aspect of that. I mean, it's to me it's terrifying enough to be in the deep end of a pool, but the whole open water kind of thing, and then when you throw in the other aspects of a lot of other fit people throwing elbows and heels and whatnots, and it becomes a contact sport, at least at the beginning, it seems.
Yeah, for sure. It's people bouncing into you and water is splashing everywhere. You can't barely see where you're going, and that's a minute of what can be a very long day. Many years to go from that point. So it's always a kind of a harsh start to the event, I find.
I've had, I not anything close to you, but I did a lot of cycling as an undergrad, and then got in more so into running and ultras and whatnots in later life. And I certainly appreciate the respect and motivation aspects and discipline of, getting out and getting the miles in and that sort of a thing. But I think it's a different breed with swimming. I mean, I had a high school friend who had actually, in an ironic way, qualified for the 1980 Olympics, when that was
Mm.
the year we boycotted.
Yeah, of
So
course. Yeah, I
it
was
was
gonna
sort of
say
like,
we didn't go.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
and that was kind of it for his swimming career. But I remember he swam club, and he was, up with, it felt like probably the middle of the night. I know it's the same, like cross country and stuff like that. But and then after school was out, then back to the other workout, and for
Well,
him.
yeah, swimming's interesting, right? Because it's a blessing and a curse. One, it's not as hard on your body as running because you're not having the impact.
Hmm.
But so that's the blessing. But the curse side of that means that you can do it a whole lot more. I mean, you can't run for 4 or 5 hours a day and expect to not get injured, right? So
Right.
even guys that are putting in a lot of volume are still not running like that much every single
Hmm.
day in, day out. Whereas swimming, it's like, well, you're not gonna get injured. So coach is like, yep, 2 hours before school, 2 hours after school, weights after that, again,
Yeah.
Saturday morning for 3 hours. So
Gosh.
before you know, you're racking up quite a lot of time with your head under the water.
Well, yeah, and what he did psychologically for that was he would plot for all of the distance that he had, like as if he were swimming the Mississippi. So he had like a
Uh-huh.
little map of the Mississippi, on his wall at home, and here's how far, here's how close I am getting to wherever it was he was headed to. So that's, yeah, well, tip of the hat. So let me go back to something you made mention to, and I think it's really kind of, I don't know, maybe fundamental to speaking to learning more about, who you are as a person, and your mettle. I think the proverbial, you go to Yale, get a bachelor's in economics, and kind of probably going on this regular trajectory, but then you had a desire to see the world. Is that right? Like after you graduated?
Yeah, yeah. So I had graduated, and I was fairly young for my grade. So I just was just turned 21 when I graduated from college, and figured I would probably end up working on Wall Street or finance in some capacity, or some sort of business down the road. But I also figured, hey, I'm 21 years old. I'd love to see a little bit of the world. I always kind of dreamed about traveling, and in summers through college and high school, I started a house painting company with one of my best buddies, and so we would paint houses in the summer, and just every summer I would just sock away, a few $1,000s more to kind of save up for this trip. So I didn't have a lot of money saved up, but it was enough to, maybe it was $10,000 or $12,000 or something like that, but enough to get a plane ticket, and one-way plane ticket to go kind of off into the world and
So
surviving on.
So
Go ahead.
that's amazing. So was that like with those summer painting jobs and stuff? Was the goal then to say, hey, once I graduate, I'm going to treat myself to this round the world trip, or was it sort of I'm
Yeah, that
socking
was kind of
away?
always.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that was kind of always what the purpose was for. It was kind of twofold. One was to have a little bit of just money in my pocket throughout the school year to
Hmm.
just like incidentals and basic stuff like that, and then the stuff I didn't spend during the school year, I would save away with the hopes of when I graduated being able to take a trip around the world, to
Gotcha.
see some of the world. And yeah, so I basically just packed up a backpack and a surfboard after graduating college and set off into the world for kind of an adventure with no itinerary, to say the least. I started in Fiji and ended up hitchhiking through New Zealand for a couple months, and I was in Australia, and I
All
was in
solo,
Southeast
all
Asia,
by yourself?
Thailand. Yeah, yeah, by myself. I mean, traveling by yourself, you very quickly meet other people. So I'd never felt like I was too alone. But yes,
Nice.
I was alone,
Did you
out in
did
the
you
world.
travel a lot as a kid, or was this kind of a new thing?
No, no, this is a new thing for me, and as a kid, and my family didn't grow up with, a lot of money in my family, and we would visit. I think you're in Chicago, so our big trip every year was to see my grandmother who lives in Evanston.
Hmm.
So we would fly out there, but other than that, we weren't like getting on airplanes and taking trips to places like that. Certainly not international destinations or anything like
Wow.
that. So
Wow.
most of my travel as a kid was, hopping in the car with my siblings and my parents and driving an hour or two outside of Portland, Oregon, where I'm from, and
So this
when
is
having
this is a
family,
radical departure then. Passports
yeah,
and
yeah,
backpack and
exactly,
surfboard and
exactly,
bon
exactly.
voyage.
So it was definitely, yeah, it was something I dreamed about for a long time, and yeah, it was amazing certainly to be out in the world, as a young person, kind of feeling that freedom and meeting new people.
So to lead the witness a little bit here. So how long had you been traveling before you went to Thailand?
Yeah, so I was about 6 months into this trip, in Thailand, and I was hoping to having traveled for a year, and then you know, um, unfortunately, tragedy befell me when I arrived to Thailand, and I was on a rural an island called Koh Tao in the Gulf of Thailand there, and I was doing a little bit of scuba diving, and I ended up on the beach participating in somewhat of a foolish activity, which was jumping a flaming jump rope. Sounds ridiculous, but it's
That's not
fairly
an
common
Olympic
in
sport,
Thailand.
is it?
Yeah, I'm apparently not very good at it because the rope wrapped around my legs and
Oh,
lit my body completely on fire. Actually, so the excess kerosene from the rope splashed my entire body.
oh,
And
gosh.
I was on fire to my neck and had to jump into the ocean to extinguish the flames, which ultimately saved my life, but not before
Wow.
about 5% of my body was severely burned, primarily my legs and feet. And
Gosh,
so this
Colin.
began a very long and tragic chapter in my life.
Well, and what, I mean, I envision that in the sense of, let's see, could I, how much, A, I'm on fire. B, my choice is to, like, no choice, to go jump into water that's probably not the most, pharmaceutical grade of cleanliness, and salt water. So,
Yeah.
you must have just, been in excruciating pain on top of pain with that kind of an experience. So then
Yeah.
the flames
It
are out?
was.
Do you pass out? What happens next?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a painful time, as you described. The ocean ultimately saved my life, but then imagine not having skin on about 25% of your body and jumping into salt water. It's not the nicest feeling in the world, to
And
say
by
the least.
yourself in Thailand.
Yeah, so there the ambulance on this island was a moped, and so they picked me up on a back of a moped and drove me down a dirt path, and got on that dirt path and taken to the quote unquote the hospital. The hospital turned out to be a one single room shack essentially with some basic medical supplies, and that was about
Wow.
it. So I
Unbelievable.
was there for about 24 hours and then thrown in the back of a pickup truck and put onto a boat to take to the other island. I had the better hospital, and the better hospital on the adjacent island was slightly better, but I had to go under 8 surgeries while I was there. And every time I would come out of each one of those surgeries, there'd be literally a cat running around my bed in the
Oh,
ICU.
gosh.
So
Oh,
it was
jeez.
better than the one room shack, but it wasn't a lot better.
Not a
Uh,
lot better.
yeah.
Oh,
And
man.
then finally, about 8 days into this whole ordeal, I was able to be transferred to Bangkok, which has much better medical facilities. But it was a long 8 days before that, and still, many months until I could even go back to the United States. And one of the hardest parts about the whole thing was that the doctors were coming in. Like I said, most of the burns covered my legs and feet.
Mhm.
And the doctors were telling me at the time, they're saying, hey, you'll most likely never walk again normally.
Gosh. Did
Just the
it,
way that
so it was,
the heal of
yeah, I
that.
mean, did you have to go through grafts and things like that, or?
Yeah, so I had severe second degree and third degree burns.
Mm.
No bad grafting, although I probably should have grafted my left foot because it didn't. It was pretty badly burned. It still has some significant scar tissue over top of it.
Mhm.
But the way that the burns were, there's really bad over my ankles, my whole legs, but particularly bad over my ankle and knee joints,
Mhm.
and potentially burning the ligaments in there. And so they thought, at some point you might be able to kind of get back on your feet at some regard, but there's no way that your mobility is going to be, full and
Wow.
complete, and you're basically going to not be, I'd been an athlete, let alone not be an athlete, but certainly not be a fully, able-bodied person in
Right.
their mind. That's what they were telling me at the time. So obviously, yeah,
Gosh, man.
despite the physical trauma was horrible, but also as I was kind of projecting forward to my mind what my life was going to look
Right.
like, it felt like, I guess, the what I had taken for granted of my health had been, taken away from me
Mhm.
in an instant, and I sort of was downward spiraling quickly, for sure.
So, and then, did your mom come over and lend a hand, or tell us about that?
Yeah, so really for me, the hero of this story is my mother. She flew over to Thailand to look after me, and you can probably, I don't know if you're a father or not, but I'm not a father yet, but I hopefully will be at some point in my life. But can only imagine as a parent what it's like to see your kid in this state, in this
Oh, gosh.
foreign
Yeah.
country in the middle of nowhere, all that stuff, and the yeah, so basically, she came in my hospital room every single day, and instead of crying beside me, instead of being just as afraid as I was, she kind of came in and filled me with positivity. She said, "You know what? I think you're gonna get through this. Your life is not over. Like, let's think about what you want to. Let's stay positive. Let's think about the future." And she really encouraged me to set a goal in that hospital room.
Mhm.
And honestly, initially, I was like, "Mom, you're crazy. My life, I was depressed. My life's over. I'm in so much pain. What are you
Sure.
talking about? All that
Yeah.
kind of stuff."
Yeah.
And then finally I was like, you know what? Like, okay, I'll play along. And my goal that I set for myself was to one day complete a triathlon, which is not something I had ever done before. But it was just
Wow.
kind of in my mind, I was like, fine, you know what? I've always loved sports. I've always been an athlete. Like for me, if I could, swim, bike, and run and cross a finish line, that would mean to me that I could, kind of had my life back. And so that was the goal that I put in my mind as I recovered from this injury. And it was, it wasn't three, like I said, several months till I flew back to the United States. And when I flew back to the United States, I still hadn't taken a single step. I was carried on and off the
Really?
plane,
Oh my
placed in a wheelchair.
gosh.
I was in a wheelchair. And one of the more poignant moments, I mentioned this. I recently gave a TED talk. I mentioned this moment because it really stands out for me in that talk, which was my mom took a chair from our kitchen table and set it one step in front of my wheelchair. And she said, "Great, you've got this big triathlon goal. That's amazing. But before you can swim, bike, and run, you need to figure out how to take one single step." And so
Wow.
I, take literally that day, it kind of took me, I think it took me 3 or 4 hours or something to get up from that wheelchair and take that first single step to sit in the chair
Wow.
in front of me. But that first step was the first of many. And so, then she moved the chair 5 steps away the next day, 10 steps. And it went like that, just kind of day by day, a few more steps. And fast forward 18 months after this, I had, about a year into it, I was, kind of walking and moving around normally and kind of wanted to get my life back on track. And so I took a job in Chicago, moved out there. I was trading commodities out there, and I signed up for the Chicago Triathlon to sort of honor this goal that I had set for myself. And I didn't know
Hmm.
if I was going to be able to complete it or achieve it or what, but I said, you know what, I set that goal and I'm going to keep working towards it. So I signed up about 4 or 5 months before the race and spent that spring and summer doing my best I could to train for it. And on August of 2009, I raced the Chicago Triathlon, which turned out to be an incredible moment in my life because not only did I finish the race, but I surprised the hell out of myself when I actually won the entire race, placing first overall out of 4,000
Man.
some people.
Man.
And it was a surreal moment. I
Gosh. Colin,
still
I
can
mean,
barely.
yeah, it's like we should just take a pause in silence and like digest that. I mean, it's sort of like, gosh, I mean, first of all, amazing, congratulations. That is, I mean, what a hallmarks, the situation from the 18 months or, X time prior. But you must have been going through rehab at the same time you're doing training and stuff, right? I mean, I,
Yeah.
do you have like an S on your chest? Are you like,
No,
from
to me it's
from Krypton? That's just
I
amazing.
no, for me, in my mind, I'm just a regular guy, really.
Wow.
I just think that there was, what it made me realize, and certainly and I'm sure we'll get into this a little more with the world records I've set and things I've done since then. But, to me, that moment in time was a special moment, crossing that finish line, of course, winning the race,
Mm-hmm.
was an incredible, unexpected outcome.
Mm-hmm.
But more so than anything, it was a great testament to those 18 months. And it was a testament to my mother realizing that, me, I was in this sort of what I'd say sort of sliding doors or roads converging in the woods of my life of,
Mm-hmm.
I could go down one path, which I wanted to go down, which it seemed like I was going to go down, which was depression, um, you know, trauma,
Right.
emotional trauma, physical trauma,
Right.
all these things. She said, you know what, let's shift this mindset towards the positive. Like, let's just think about this, what can we do each day? Take that first step out of the wheelchair, then take those 2 steps and really learning that I don't think I have the S tattooed on my chest. I think I'm a pretty normal guy. But what I think is that as humans, all of us have these reservoirs of untapped potential within us, and that when we make these decisions in our mind, when we set goals, when we pursue things with passion, and fully embody them, we can achieve incredible things that almost seem impossible at the time. But as we work towards them, we can get there. And so I've really, it was such a gift that my mom gave me, certainly to get me out of the depths of despair of this burn accident, but even more so to realize, my potential in the long run. And kind of I've taken that with me over the last 10 years. Into many other things that pursuits that I've done and continue to do, because I still believe that the essence of that narrative is the same. Is that there's many other things that can be achieved and done, and it's really just a matter of committing fully to them and pursuing them with passion.
I love that, Colin. I think it's, you're the things that you overcame, the traumatic aspects of it, the psychological, the physical, etc., and the fact of kind of doing this from a situation of support and love and nurturance from your mom, I think is something that people can also take away with it and see how they can apply things in their circumstances and in their lives. And like with the situation with your mom, did she instill goal setting in you, and was that a pivotal point in Thailand? Was that something in your upbringing as a kid, or do you think that
Yeah,
goal setting would be different had this trauma not happened for you, or what do you think?
yeah, I think that, certainly it's something that I had been, taught and nurtured throughout my life for sure. It's something that she has always instilled in me and certainly has surrounded me with the right other members of the family, coaches, teachers, mentors throughout life. And I've
Hmm.
definitely been a very goal driven person throughout life, whether
Hmm.
that's, in sports or academically or whatever else I was pursuing in my life. I've definitely kind of been someone who has always embraced that. But certainly, it was she had laid the foundation of that through my childhood, but in this really intense moment, it was nice to sort of harken back onto that lesson. And she said, well, how have you accomplished other things in your life? How have you got through other things? How have you achieved your dreams and things? Like,
That's
well, here we are
great.
right now, we're in a hospital bed in Thailand. She's like, remember what we've done in the past? And I was like, let's set a goal, like let's move towards that. And it
Wow.
sounds, I mean, in a lot of ways it sounds, I don't know, maybe it sounds basic or obvious, but it wasn't obvious to me at the time. And really
Yeah.
reframing my mind towards that and being able to have a purpose, to move forward. So it wasn't just oh great, well I'm taking another step or this really hurts, whatever. It was like I'm taking a step, and each one of these steps is one step closer to that goal of that triathlon, which was what I pursued my passion towards. And again, for me, a lot of my sort of canvas, the way I've expressed myself, has been through sports and movement in my body. But
Right.
that's not to say that I think that goal setting only applies to sports. Like, in fact, not at all. Of course, this
Hmm.
applies to all aspects of life, whether people want to express themselves through, relationships, love, business, entrepreneurship, arts, paint, whatever it is. Like,
Hmm.
I could go, the list goes on and on and on. And I think that the essence of this applies to that as well.
That's fantastic. Gosh. Well, and I think what you've said is so, elemental. I mean, you said, maybe it sounds too basic, but I think a lot of times, in situations of stress and situations of trauma or whatever, that it's easy to forget those kinds of things and to then be able to kind of have a goal, deconstruct it, reverse engineer it, bring it down to, okay, if I have this goal, if I want to do this triathlon or this climb or this race or this whatever, you don't cram for it. You don't just think that the night before you decide to go do
Right.
something. So you kind of break it down and then go back, and then you so you're I'm going to take us back to Chicago and winning this triathlon. So you were also then trading, is that right? You in
Yeah, yeah. I
Chicago?
was
Okay.
with commodities trader. Yep.
Gotcha. So then tell us the transition from commodities trader and walk on winner of the Chicago Triathlon to becoming a professional triathlete. What's that like? How does that metamorphosis happen?
Yeah, it was like I said, a pretty incredible moment of life, and then before I knew it, life moved pretty quickly over the next couple of weeks. I had gotten to know a guy by the name of Brian Gelber, who's a really successful trader in Chicago. Not the firm that I was working for, but I'm friends with his kids and knew him through that industry a little bit. And he heard about this story. Happened to be going to a barbecue at his house. I think that at the same night that I was had just won the Chicago Triathlon and got to talking with him, and
Good timing.
he had become somewhat of a mentor for me. And he was like, "Wow, it's an incredible story." And I was talking to him just about my life and what I wanted to pursue. And I said, it's always been a dream of mine to be a professional athlete. And he said, well, I would love to be your first sponsor if this is something you want to pursue full time. And
Wow.
so it was an incredible gift that he gave me to really, believe in me and invest in me, obviously financially, but also emotionally, to say, hey, this is incredible, but we think you can do even more and even better. So, go for it. And certainly, not as potentially lucrative of a path as being a Wall Street guy for the last 10 years or whatnot. But for me, there was no question in my mind what I wanted to pursue and where my heart was. And so I
Sure.
literally I walked in my office the next morning, quit my job. And this was, the race was in August, so this was probably in September. And as you know from being a local Chicago guy, that the winters in Chicago are not exactly the best place to be for
Yeah,
training for a
I
triathlon.
do not enjoy
Uh,
running in the winter.
yeah. And so it also became very clear that I wasn't going to be able to stay there. And so within 2 weeks, I went in, quit my job, finished my job, got in touch with some people in the triathlon community who I was just kind of like reaching out to, and I got an opportunity to move to Australia to train with a couple of Olympians down there and one of the former Australian national team coaches
Wow.
in Australia. So before I knew it, like in my whole life, and I was like, went from I'm just doing this race, I'm a guy living in Chicago to I don't have this job anymore. I'm now a professional athlete and I'm living in Australia, like all within a matter of a few.
No half
But
measures for you, Colin.
yeah, kind of just all in.
Yeah.
And it I kind of, and in a lot of ways, that was whatever 2009 September, so over 8 years ago at this point, and I kind of feel like I've been on this journey as a professional athlete in several iterations now since then. So,
Wow.
in a lot of ways, just a leap of faith to say, sometimes when you know it in your heart and everything's in alignment. It was just these weren't decisions that I toiled over of like, should I, could I, what would happen
Right.
if, it was like, yep, okay, da da
Yep.
da da, da,
Ready
here
to
I am.
go.
And I show up in Australia, and it's funny. I'm all of a sudden I'm training with guys who are seasoned professionals, and some guys who've been to the Olympics and whatnot. And
Wow.
admittedly, they were much better athletes than me at the time. I was kind of just this new guy, and they're like, "So how long have you been racing triathlon? How many races have you
Yeah.
done?" This, and I'm like,
And you say,
"Yeah."
"What day is it?"
So everything was very new. But
Wow.
there's something special, obviously, probably in a Zen practice, that idea of beginner's mind. There's something special when everything is
Hmm.
is new and fresh and exciting, and you're passionate about it. There was so much excitement for me that even the life of a professional triathlete is somewhat nomadic, but also obviously very hard on your body. It requires a lot of discipline and a
Right.
lot of stress and various things, and eating and sleeping right and all those things. But I was just excited to learn all of those aspects and really embrace this new journey.
So, like, take us back to that time. What would a typical day of training look like when you were on that 6 continent, 25 country circuit?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot. It was pretty much, I say it's a 24/7 type of job. Of course, the training hours you're putting in, on an average day, we training anywhere between 2 to 3 hours would be a lighter day. Big day might be 5, 6 plus hours. Usually at minimum 2 sessions in a day, oftentimes three. And oftentimes when we're doing 3 sessions, it means you're doing a swimming session, a biking session, a running session, sometimes running twice in a day. It could be sort of
Wow.
all various types of things. But the reason that I say it's a 24/7 job is because really what your job is to become the fittest, strongest human being that you can be. And so that also means when you're not training, that means you're recovering, right? That's actually when we
Hmm.
get stronger. You know this, of course.
Yep. Yep.
And so it's not like you're like, oh God, I just finished up that 3 hour bike ride. Now I'm gonna go out and grab some beers with my buddies and hang out because my next workout's not till tomorrow morning. It's like, okay, no, I gotta like go home and stretch and eat
Yep.
right and sleep right and all this sorts of stuff. And so really, it's a sort of constant focus in your mind to 24/7. There was definitely times of course for the most part 99% of it I loved it, but there was times when I was kind of like, can I just like leave my body for 24 hours and like do
Please.
something else? Like and you
Yeah.
can't. It's a complete discipline. But really,
Any
really fun.
any diet hacks or tips or anything like that? Like,
Um,
do you have any, like, you paleo, you vegan, you just regular
yeah, no.
good
So my
nutrition, or?
Yeah, so I kind of grew up in a pretty healthy environment. My mom and stepdad founded a chain of natural foods grocery stores in the Pacific Northwest, kind of as I was graduating from high school, but they had been working in the natural foods industry throughout my entire childhood. And then my father is actually an organic farmer now living in Hawaii for the last about 15, 20 years. He's been over
Wow.
there. And so there's really kind of been a health food focus around my childhood. And
Hmm.
so it's funny, I don't actually follow any really specific diet in the way. It's not like my diet is this new fad diet or whatnot.
Hmm.
But I have sort of always eaten in a very healthy way and somewhat intuitive. There have been a few moments in time where I've really tried to measure everything out and get it all perfect. And I find, at least for me, that kind of does my head in. And
Yeah.
I see
Yeah.
I get so stressed about, oh,
Right.
that's 2 grams too much of that rice, or that's too much of this.
Yeah.
And so now I kind of just I realize that I have sort of, because I've eaten this way for so long, been pretty intuitive about it. But generally, a typical meal for me, I love whole grains, quinoa, beans, rice, that kind of stuff as a base, and
Mm.
steamed vegetables, kale, and then I don't eat vegan, so I do eat meat, some meat. More I prefer lean meats like poultry or fish,
Mhm.
and oftentimes there's many stretches of my life where I have been, vegetarian or more vegetarian than anything, and not by strict choice, but just
Mhm.
because that's what makes my body feel good.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of the way that I find my diet to be.
Gotcha. Tell us, these may be two questions, but they may have the same answer. I'm not sure. They're going to have different answers. But what's your most memorable race, and what was your toughest race when you were competing professionally?
Mm. Um, that's a good question. Let me think about that for a second. Hmm. Well, there was this race that I did in Indonesia. I don't remember what year it was, 2012, maybe 2013. And I think it was 105 degrees at 6 a.m. when the race started.
Oh my gosh.
Um,
Oh,
and it was like,
jeez.
90% humidity. So it wasn't,
Oh.
the sun was out, but it felt like you were just like in like a cloud. Um, and it was interesting race to say the least. I dove into the water and then come to find out that the pH, I'm gonna get this wrong, but the pH of normal water is like 4.7 or something like that, like pH roughly. I think it was 3 points higher than that acidity rate. So it was not the cleanest water in the world, to say
Gosh.
the least.
Oh
And
gosh.
about an hour into the bike and run, I started getting some major GI issues,
Oh, I
and what
bet.
get combined with the fact that in professional, so in ITU triathlon, it's a draft legal bike, so you're actually in bike packs, more like a criterium race than an
Mhm.
Ironman where you're not allowed to draft. Um, and I ended up in this pack with these two Russian guys. And one of the Russian guys, so they were talking to each other in Russian. I didn't know. We know a lot of the athletes pretty well over the circuit, but I actually didn't know these guys super well. And they're talking to each other, and they're trying to attack me and drop me off the back of the bike, and they get me away. And then finally, one guy comes up beside me, and he actually punches me in the side of the head.
Oh my
And that breaks
gosh.
away from the group. So like everything went wrong for me. Like it was stupid hot, and I was just uncomfortable, and it was too hot
Oh.
racing. I get punched in the head by a random Russian guy, and in the end, I actually got really, really sick from swimming in the water, actually, and I thought the other athletes did as well. So it was just kind of one
Oh.
thing. I remember after the race, like it's 105 degrees out, and I'm under blankets because I'm so cold and shivery from fever, and I'm just like, okay,
Oh.
what am I doing here? This is horrible. So uh, that would be probably one of my least favorite
Oh
experiences,
man.
to say the least. And
Oh.
then one of my favorite memories, let's see. One of my wasn't the last race I ever did as a professional, but it was a race that sort of began this next chapter of my life, which was setting these world records in mountaineering. It was 2014. I was racing a half Ironman race in Richmond, Virginia. Excuse me, no, in South Carolina, it's Anderson, South Carolina, and I ended up actually winning the race, and it was an interesting race because it was crazy thunderstorms, and I remember we were riding bikes through what felt like almost like inches of water were flying off the ground. So it was definitely a
Oh.
cold, challenging, and tough race. But I ended up actually winning the race, which was fantastic for me, and it was a proud moment for me. But it was also a moment when I was a turning point moment for me, which I was very, very proud of this professional win at that level, but also was the feeling of like, you know what, like maybe I'm ready for my next challenge. Do I want to
Mhm.
keep racing triathlon, or what's next for me? And it was kind of in that moment, or in that period of time right after that race, that I really decided, I love pushing my body. I love pushing my body and finding my limits, but I wanted to sort of set a new goal for myself, and do something that had a larger purpose than my own sort of winning or losing on the race course. And that's when I dreamed up this, mountaineering world record project, which I spent the last couple years of my life on, which was to see if I could set the world record for something called the Explorers Grand Slam. So to try to climb the tallest mountain on each of the seven continents, known as the 7 summits, as well as complete expeditions to both the North and South Pole faster than anyone's ever done done that. And that was it's kind of interesting in my triathlon. When I look back at my triathlon career, it was really in that moment of winning a race, actually, that I felt at ease or ready to make the next transitional shift in my life and set my next set of goals.
That's nice. I think it's like what Jerry Seinfeld said, something like, always leave them wanting more, kind of a thing. I think it's kind of nice to go out on a high note, but also saying, gosh, I'm really not going to be missing, racing like this, or getting hit in the head, by a nasty Russian cyclist or something like that. So
Yeah.
2014-15 was really kind of this. Weren't you also climbing as well as still competing in
Yeah, so in
triathlons?
2014 was that race that I just mentioned, and then I had a short off season after that where I actually got engaged,
Oh,
and then kind of in that sort of moment of you know embarking on the next larger chapter in my own life, personal life, as well as sort of moving forwards. I decided that I wanted to see if I could set this world record, and Jenna, my fiance, was hugely instrumental in helping me not only dream about this but actually figure out what that was going to take. Again, like
wow.
we mentioned before, it's like, my mom saying, "Hey, great, you want to race this triathlon? We need to figure out how to take one single step." It's like, "Hey, great, you want to set this world record? Like, well, you're not a professional mountaineer, and that's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you don't have the financial support. And oh, you want to found a nonprofit and actually make impact in the community around it, and it's like, great, that's a cool
Yeah.
idea."
No,
Uh,
no half
uh,
measures, Colin.
yeah, so
So
we'll
let's circle back to her just for a quick second here. Do am I recalling this correctly? Where did you propose?
Yeah, so I proposed on the top of one of Ecuador's tallest mountains, around about 19,000 feet on the summit up there. And so mountains were playing a significant role in our life at this moment, for sure.
So she climbs
Um,
with you, or would climb with you on some of your expeditions?
Yeah, yeah, she's definitely I wouldn't say she's an avid mountaineer by any standards, but she climbed the tallest mountain in Ecuador, which is 20,350 feet, taller than Denali. Definitely a very,
Jeez.
very high peak, and
Yep.
she's very capable of getting up there. I always joke around with her because she's not a lifelong athlete. She was a dancer growing up, and
Mm.
I have a high level of respect for anyone
Hmm.
who's danced at that level, because it is athleticism to an high degree, although it doesn't always get put in that category.
Hmm.
Um, but she's one of these people where she's run a couple marathons over the last couple years, but it's like no running ever in her background, and then like she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna run this marathon in a few months," and then she gets off the couch and does it. I mean, she's not setting world record times, but it's the fact she just can get up and do that after not being like a lifelong runner, to me, is always
It's a
impressive. So
big deal.
that's kind of how she is with mountains. And she's not like she's like out there climbing mountains all the time, but like when she's like, "Oh, you want to go do that thing in Ecuador in a couple months? All right, cool. I'm gonna work out for a couple months, and I should be good to go." Like, and then like we get back, and she's like, "Oh, that was fun," and she just kind of moves on to something else. So
That's
she's
awesome.
definitely got some sort of natural ability
That's a
inside of her,
rare
for sure.
thing. That's a rare
Yeah,
thing. For the
yeah.
climbs that I've done, my wife has never been happy when I've gone off to go do them. So and she doesn't like, she's not got a she's not real happy about, like, even just for herself, of heights, and that then generalizes to everybody else. Oh, you shouldn't do this. So
Right.
it's
No, she's
that's
yeah,
awesome.
Jenna has been incredibly supportive over time. That's no doubt about that.
So now I want to. This is kind of our deep dive. Simultaneously, you're starting to train and getting your mountaineering chops. You're developing a nonprofit, and you're doing this in the context, and I think a very synthetic, wonderfully blended way of setting a couple of world records. So, tell us about that. That sounds like a great story.
Yeah, 2015 was an interesting year. It's just kind of exactly what you just alluded to. What was, I still had some solid support in triathlon, which was allowed me to, at least keep the lights on at my house and put food on the table. But also, as I was training for these mountaineering world records, it was a great coincidence. That's, what do you need to, try to set two of the largest mountaineering records in the world, where ultimately huge endurance challenges. I was going to need to be able to be out climbing mountains for 100, 150 days in a row without stopping. It turns out that, of course, you need to be in the mountains, and of course, you need to have some technical mountaineering knowledge, which I had already had built up over some throughout my childhood and life, and certainly there was things I could continue to learn. But it was also need to be super fit. So triathlon training was actually a perfect balance to the cardio and strength that I was going to need for that. So
I
I kind of
bet.
sat down with my coach and said, "Hey, I'm going to race professionally this year. One more year, 2015. I'm going to switch to the Ironman distance," which I did. But the larger goal is going to be 2016 to set these mountaineering world records. And so it was kind of this hybrid in terms of my physical training. It was like training for triathlon with still some big professional triathlon goals in mind, but the larger goal of being these mountaineering challenges. And so we interspersed a lot of actual, technical mountaineering and climbing into my training regimen, which of course
Wow.
were not normally there when I was
Yeah.
just purely doing triathlon. And
Wow.
then,
Well,
at the same time,
and amping it up to Ironman distances too is no easy task either. I mean, that seems like that must have been just, a really grueling, great physical training for the climbing, but also, just again, a nice synergy, getting kind of a win-win. This better
yeah, yeah.
athleticism generalizes.
Yeah, it's funny, the Olympic distance circuit, in my opinion, to me, they're just very apples and oranges. So, the Olympic distance circuit, less people know about it outside the professional ranks, but in a lot of ways, I think has more depth and challenge to it, just because it's so intense, it's so fast,
Mm-hmm.
it's really anaerobic.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Ironman training is, of course, way longer in distances and duration, but it's a lot more lower heart rates or threshold type of effort. So it was definitely a huge shift,
Yeah.
not just in increasing the distances, but kind of changing. So I was training at lower intensities, which is way more similar to mountaineering, where you're climbing, you're out climbing for whatever 15, 16 hours and at a clip, but at a very
Mm-hmm.
minimally low heart rate. You're not like sprinting up the mountain, of course.
Yeah.
And so that was a good for me. But then, of course, during this whole time while I was still doing all of this, it was trying to figure out all these things. So there was a huge entrepreneurial sort of hustle that went in. It was like, again, I needed to raise a bunch of money to do this just to break even on it. I wasn't trying to make myself any money, but I was just trying to be able to actually fly to all these parts of the world and figure out how to get expeditions set up in the North Pole and the South Pole and Mount Everest and all these places. And at the same time, the larger purpose around this was a campaign. We not found a nonprofit that was all focused on inspiring kids to get outside, and set their own goals and venture and move their bodies through health and wellness, and certainly in the sort of aspirational goal setting that my mother instilled in me. And so, figuring all those out and making great partnerships in the nonprofit space and things like that. So there was just kind of an endless supply of work and different things we needed to figure out. Jen and I had a funny conversation at one point, kind of early on. She was like, I'm definitely going to help you with this. Like, I could, kind of give you my time a day or two a week to kind of help you on this. And she had some other things that she was pursuing at the moment. And then about a week or two later, she's like, looks at me and she's like, so what I'm realizing is you pretty much need my help 100 hours a week, 7 days a week, and you can't pay me anything. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty much right.
Yeah.
So
Bingo.
so no, but
Wow.
she's definitely. I mean, obviously, I was the one that out climbing the mountains and set the records, but this was hugely a team effort. Definitely could not have done it without her, and her, just dedication and desire to be a part of this. Over it was really ultimately was 2 years from inception and of idea to a year plus of in the planning, and then another 139 days in the execution of the actual expeditions themselves, and then the aftermath, of course, of leveraging all of that. So it's been a journey to say the least, and something we were on together for sure from the beginning.
That is so cool. I'm quite the amateur climber, and I've done 3 of the 7 summits, and I've done like Rainier and Whitney and stuff here in the States and whatnot, and other couple of little things, and so I have great respect for even just the logistics and the travel. I mean, I remember when I went to Tanzania, there wasn't an airport in Tanzania to fly into. You had to go into
Hmm.
Nairobi, and then there was like this at the time. This is a million years ago, but it was like there was like bandits on this one road. They would, block the road and steal your stuff, And I mean, I just sort of, and I remember even in Elbrus in the Caucasus, like just, you fly from Moscow on, like Aeroflot into Minerline Vodi, and it's like just, it just
Yeah.
it takes forever, and you can't, nothing runs on time, and I can't imagine your logistics, Colin. I mean,
Yeah. The
gosh, and plus you're dealing with weather. I mean, you got so many rolls of the dice of where something could go sideways so easily, and just kind of ruin the attempt. So
Oh, totally.
didn't you have some weather issue, or there was something that kind
Oh,
of
I've many weather issues, but just
yeah.
of the logistics for a second. Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. And not only that, we couldn't necessarily plan flights and things ahead of time because I didn't know exactly when or I'd be getting off these
You're
mountains.
gonna
So I was
be
trying
there.
also, literally it'd be like
Right.
I'd be, we had more or less logistics and things lined up, and I was for the most part, climbing by myself. I wasn't, climbing guided or anything like that. I was just climbing by myself or having various, friends of mine join me for, being a climbing partner on one mountain or something
Nice.
like that.
Nice.
So that allowed, of course, a bit more flexibility. But still, it would be like I remember one point originally I had planned to climb Kilimanjaro, I think fourth or fifth in a sequence. And then I finished the South Pole expedition, Mount Vinson, the tallest mountain in Antarctica, and then Aconcagua. I finished Aconcagua about a week or so ahead of when I had originally planned to do that. And so I called Jenna. I'm just coming off of Aconcagua. I call home to Jenna and I say, "Hey, I think we could have time to fit Kilimanjaro in now. Can you figure that out? So I'm gonna be in the back to the hotel after this long drive in 10 hours. Can you have an itinerary set up for me?" And I get there and she's like, "Well, here you go. Tomorrow you fly to Sao Paulo. You have a 7-hour layover there. Then that's going to go to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, where you have a 15-hour layover. And then you'll be in that tiny little airport in Tanzania. And then you need to be, and that gets in at 5 p.m. and you need to be ready to start climbing at 7 a.m. the next morning." Like, so that, I mean, it was that kind of
Oh,
thing.
gosh.
Everything was just, on the fly,
That's
crazy
amazing. I mean,
adrenaline.
just I got stuck in Benin. I was going to go to Cameroon. I was doing some work with a nonprofit that I do, and the flight got canceled, and I was like marooned for 5 days. I mean, it was just like
Oh
there,
yeah.
And so the fact of you being able to make all those points, and I'm sure she's saying, and you'll get plenty of rest, with this 7-hour layover, so then you can just
Yeah, exactly.
go tootle right on up Kilimanjaro. So,
Yeah, so it's like
ah,
that. I mean, there's many, many other stories like that throughout
gosh,
the 139 days, but it was kind of one of these sort of not on the fly. It was as planned as we possibly could, but we needed to be able to be
sure.
flexible. And you mentioned weather; it's the same type of thing of kind of realizing where weather windows were and whatnot. At one point I'm in Indonesia, and I think that I'm going to fly to Moscow for a couple of days, get ready for my Elbrus expedition, and I was actually climbing Elbrus in winter. I imagine you climbed it in
Oh,
June or July. It's
mm-hmm.
the
Oh, I
nicest time
can't
to climb it.
imagine.
Uh, but I climbed it in early March, because I was, of course, trying to set this record, and that was
Oh,
going to give me a better chance to do so, timing wise. And so we looked at the weather forecast and there was like one good day of weather, and then it was going to be this huge storm was coming. It was going to dump like 3 feet of snow, 100-mile-per-hour winds, and it looked like that was going to sustain for the next like few weeks. And it was like,
wow.
well, you need to figure out how to get up there like as fast as possible. So I'm in Indonesia, literally coming off a helicopter off Carson's Pyramid, and Jenna's like, "Okay, so I can get you to go fly through Bali and Jakarta. Then you're gonna have to pick up your extra gear that's there, and then from Jakarta you're gonna go to Doha, Qatar, Moscow." I was with a Russian woman I was climbing with, and she was like, "You couldn't book the inter-Russian flights from outside the country for some reason, so we had to like get off this flight, go to the ticket counter, and say, 'Can we get the next flight to Mineral of Day?'" Get there, she like calls somebody who picks us up, drives us 3 hours, and again we're like climbing Elbrus that night. We barely make the summit and get down before this huge storm pulls in, and then we're out of there. So it's just like, I mean, again, I could go on and on about these ridiculous logistics things that just like by the nick of our teeth, skin of our teeth, excuse me. But yeah, it was kind of like that the entire time. So it was a crazy, crazy journey, not just the climbing, but the logistics and
Oh
everything that went
yeah.
into it.
I think the whole aspect of just kind of, I mean, mind stuff has been nothing even hardly to compare with yours. But it's like, I'm just like so focused on a climb and all, my gear and my this, my fitness and whatever, and just that's the sole focus of my life. And I can't imagine then like thinking, okay, 2 days from now I'm going to be heading to this other one to do this again. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
exactly.
back.
I don't know, but you come off one of these expeditions, you're like, "Great, I did it." And then
Yeah.
for me, it was like, "Great, I did it." Oh, no time to celebrate. You're on the
Right.
plane, you're sleeping, you're this, you're cramped, you're sore, like all
Yeah.
those things.
Yeah, well, again, like we talked about, like with the issues of appreciating in being a pro triathlete of recovery and the importance of that, but you got recovery on the fly as best you could and wherever you could get it. So, I think that's just amazing. So a little bit of personal disclosure here. When I was a little boy, up until gosh, probably around age 12, 13, I had an obesity issue. I had had orthopedic issues. I had never run. I'd never had a pair of tennis shoes or anything like that. I had a horrible sweet tooth. So I weighed at age 12 about 20 pounds more than I weigh today. And I was not
Mm,
the height at age 12 that I am today. And my last name is Stout. So I was sort of quite, the fat little bully magnet, of having to deal with that. So I think the fact that of the focus of like all this to bring attention and the work that you did with your nonprofit is amazing. So let's hear a little bit about that and how the kids helped with your climbing.
Yeah, so really the larger inspiration, like I said, was to do this thing, continue to push my own, boundaries and goals and see what the limits are, but really to do something that would have a larger media arc and that could capture the attention of others around what I was doing to hopefully inspire others. And for me, I mentioned before the being raised with parents who really had a kind of healthful ethic on life, and as I've got out into the world, I realized that I was incredibly fortunate to have those role models in my life, and certainly not all the young people in our country have those same role models, as we
Hmm.
can see by the statistics of childhood obesity rates skyrocketing and things like that. And so,
Hmm.
I wanted to do something that could hopefully give back in the community in a meaningful way, which was, so we founded a nonprofit called Beyond 72, and it still lives on today under that name. The 7 and the 2 stand for the 7 peaks and the 2 poles, but the beyond meaning that really what this project was never just about me setting world records. It was just me having, creating a platform to be able to tell this story, to realize that, like I said before, that we all as humans have, reservoirs of untapped potential, but also that, no matter what your goals are, and I kind of mentioned this before, whatever, that my canvas has been, the outdoors and moving my body, but really, no matter what those are, that having a healthful foundation will allow you to reach those goals. You might think, my goal is to, some academic goal, or to, to be a doctor or an engineer, all that sort of stuff. But I can tell you that if you also treat your body better, and you can, eat properly and sleep properly and have, not overweight and these things, you're going to be more successful in those other areas of life as well. So it was really a whole project around that. We ultimately partnered with an organization called the Alliance for a Healthier Generation, which is a outstanding nonprofit that's impacting 29,000 schools, 20 million kids nationwide are enrolled in their programs,
Wow.
and they're doing a sweeping job. And of course, us being a small nonprofit don't have the boots on the ground and anywhere near like this. Again, this is me and Jenna kind of on the fly, creating stuff. But with this story, what I was doing was creating a unique story for them, and so they were able to connect us into thousands of schools and school districts around the country, where
Wow.
teachers were able to bring this story into their classrooms. And it was really, it kind of grew beyond our wildest dreams in terms of that, where teachers were, of course, we originally were kind of focused on PE teachers and health and physical education type of curriculums, and kind of having that conversation. But all
Right.
of a sudden, we had social studies teachers bringing this in and saying, "Hey, well, let's follow Colin," because we were doing all this live blogging and tweeting, and I was the first person to Snapchat from the summit of Mount Everest, and things like that.
Now that should
Um,
be a world record. That's really pretty
Exactly,
cool.
that's its own world record, right? But I've done that kind of stuff to be able to reach kids, and before we knew it, we've got social studies teachers saying like, "Hey, let's follow Colin's blog every single day, but every time he's in a new country, let's do a little unit on what's it like in Nepal, what's the anthropology of
Oh,
Nepal,
that's
what's the food they're eating
great.
there, what's this?
Oh,
Oh, let's talk about Antarctica, let's talk about East Africa, let's talk about these different cultures." We had science teachers, and I still do these what I call virtual field trips, where I talk to different school districts around the country, and science or STEM curriculum, talking about atmospheric pressure at high altitudes, and extreme temperatures and things like that. And so it's
wow.
been really amazing to see that this project really blossomed into this kind of conversation starter. Really,
That's
like, I'm just
great.
the kind of a catalyst for a much larger conversation that I was able to have. And then, of course, by having a direct touch with these kids, it excited them enough to really dive into the studying side of it. So it's like, oh my
Hmm.
god, we talked to this guy, or he came to our school and told us about these world records, that's super cool. And then before they know it, their teachers are hitting them with these interesting curriculums about the world and health and wellness and these types of things. So it was really amazing. Probably my favorite, there's been many highlights, but my favorite success story with that was a sort of campaign we did, which was called um, "What's Your Everest?" And we asked kids, and sort of, as I was actually climbing Everest, is ask them, "Well, what's your Everest?" Colin has set himself this big goal.
Wow.
Colin's story, he's burned this fire, goal setting, sort of aspirational. What's your Everest? And we had kids sending me, while I was on the mountain, literally these short video clips, and saying, "My Everest is to be the first person in my family to graduate from college," or "My
Wow.
Everest,
Oh,
is to be a doctor one day," and things like that. And so that was amazing to see and sort of be able to center of that conversation. But certainly as things, got hard for me up on the mountains, there was, I actually had to make two attempts on Mount Everest. I got caught out in a bad storm my first attempt and had to go back down and actually climb all the way back up a few days later. And I'm exhausted. It's 130 some days at this point, but I'm getting these, messages and notes and video clips sent to me of these kids saying, "You're inspiring me because,
Oh,
you're climbing Everest and my Everest is this." Like, without a doubt, that's definitely when this project got hard, what inspired me, to keep moving, because it was all of a sudden doing something that was much greater than myself. I really wanted
yeah.
to make those people that were supporting this proud, and particularly the kids who were thinking about the goals in their own life. So it was
Wow.
really a special campaign, and we continue to do this work in schools around the country.
I really applaud you for that. I think, and you hit a really good point. I think when you go out and do these other kinds of things, then when you get that kind of feedback, it's almost like you feel like you almost gain more from it than the kids or whatever. They become your
Oh,
inspiration.
absolutely.
It's
Right,
it's an
right.
amazing phenomenon. So.
Mhm.
Well, gosh, Colin, I could talk with you, the rest of the afternoon. I would love to. Maybe we can do a round two. But I want to finish up with a couple of last questions. What's next? Continuing on with Beyond 7.2 and that, I presume. And what else is on your agenda?
Yeah, so let's see. Yeah, the nonprofit work definitely continues on, and that will be always think wrapped into whatever else I do moving forwards. I'm actually from Portland, Oregon. That's where I live, but I'm sitting in New York City right now, and I just finished up an event in Vermont yesterday, which was to. It kind of sounds kind of crazy, but I think your listeners might appreciate it. I did something called the 29029 challenge. So 29029 is the height of
Oh,
Everest from sea level.
back and
And
forth, right?
so so
The.
yeah, so
Yeah.
Stratton, Vermont, guy by the name of Jesse Itzler organized this event. Rented out all of the ski mountain of Stratton, Vermont, and about 150 of us climbed up and down 17 times each lap, which was 1.3 miles, 17 feet of elevation up this mountain, very steep, like 40% grade up at
That
the
is
top and muddy.
crazy.
And so I laughed that over and over and over and over again. So reached quote unquote the summit of Everest.
Wow.
So that's what I did this weekend. uh, and this past weekend. But yeah, for me, I'm dreaming up some other big expeditions in 2018. I haven't announced them yet, but stay tuned on that. And then also, also sharing this story not only with the nonprofit work I do, but this message has really resonated with all sorts of audiences. So doing a lot of speaking the corporate level, motivational speaking recently. Gave a TED talk, which is called "Change Your Mindset and Achieve Anything," which is again using my personal narrative, but really realizing the sort of universal principles that I think we can all learn and be inspired from throughout that. So really, it's been fun for me and
That's
humbling
great.
to be invited to share my story in so many different platforms via media and public speaking and that. So that's definitely a big part of what I'm doing now, and starting to think about working on a book and various things
Awesome.
like that. Lots of irons in the fire at the
That's good. Well, it's no surprise. So, I think I have to compliment you, man. I mean, I think it's a lot of times, climbing or whatever, and these athletic kinds of things can be very individual, solitary, just, on the athlete kind of thing. But you've taken it to a level to bring exposure and awareness. And like you said, in the school setting to be, healthy kids and thinking about it, being in a PE curriculum or a wellness kind of thing, but then also expanding kids' understandings of different places and different people that are very similar to themselves but happen to live, in a different part of the world. And you've taken the tool and excitement of climbing and adventure and been able to bring it to the classroom and have kids, like you said. I love the "What's Your Everest?" I mean, that make a great bumper sticker T-shirt. That's I think that's brilliant of how inspiring that can be and how inspiring your story is. So. In the show notes, we'll go through this and get all the details and stuff like that. But for sponsorships, for ways to track you, social media, those kinds of things, what are some of the best ways for people to reach out and be in touch, or to be able to follow your story and your next adventure?
Yeah. Pretty active on social, particularly Instagram and some of the other platforms, Facebook, whatnot. But Instagram, Twitter is at Colin O'Brady, just my name. And then the website is beyond72.com, which gives a little more background as well as has all the press and media and various things and podcasts and stuff up there. And yeah, please reach out. I really love hearing from folks. Reach out via my website or direct message on Instagram, Twitter, whatnot. And yeah, love hearing from folks, and that'll definitely be where we post the next round of things that I'm up to. So
Excellent. Well, we'll be keeping an eye out. We'll be looking forward to it. And Colin, let's keep in touch, man. You're an inspiration, and it's great to have you on the show.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Chris.
All right, take care. Living a Life in Full is a production of Stout Media, a subsidiary of Gordian Knot, LLC. Assistant producer, Gracie Wong. Music, Dan O'Brien. Post-production, Sam Rude. Graphics, Larry Newberry. Executive producer and host, Dr. Chris Stout. To learn more, stop by our website, alifeinfull.org, for show notes. And please recommend us to your friends and leave us a review on iTunes. Thanks.